Hi, everybody. Today I'm joined by Lila Sage, who is such a great astrologer, and we have to talk about the second attempt on Donald Trump's life, which took place yesterday at around, they said shortly before 2 p.m. So I've run my chart from 1:55 p.m. and I mean, let's take a look at it and see what we think. I've got a bunch of charts here ready to go. His birthday, his solar return, the other attempt, and America's birthday. We have a lot of interesting stuff going on. This is the chart of that moment. So yesterday, somebody snuck an AK-47 into the golf course where Trump was playing golf with a real estate investor, and uh, the guy was not a very good shot, and so once again, Donald Trump escaped largely unscathed, and this is the chart of that moment. Before I pull up any other charts, does anything about this particularly strike you?
Yeah, I was just looking at some of the Pluto placement obviously is one of the first ones I'm going to go to, and then the Mars placement here. And it's interesting because that Pluto placement is right in that second house, right? Um, which I was thinking about like assets and like a real estate investor and like being playing golf like in a very literal way, but also that it's trining his sun. I mean, it's not a real trine. It's 6 degrees, but it's a loose trine, which I would think is helpful for him in this moment as far as, getting away unscathed again, this helpful kind of push and helping the sun, because Pluto has to do, for those who don't know, Pluto has to do with death, right? And so for him, this element of death and rebirth is actually supporting his life. So in many ways, it could be helping to save his life in this moment. But it's also supporting Uranus over here, which Uranus is all about sudden things happening, stuff that you can't, expect, stuff that just happens to you. And of course, that's in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th house. So while he's playing, literally playing a game, there's this sudden spark of something happening to him. And both of these, because they're supported, right? If this was a square, I think from Uranus, we'd have a different story probably. There'd be something else happening. That doesn't mean that he would die, but there would probably be something else going on. He does have a square from Mars, right, to the south node, like exact to the south node, and then also to the north node. So to me, this is like a repeat offense, right? The south node is stuff that's happened in the past. And so, like, something happening again is coming again. Mars is pushing someone to do the same thing, right? Conjunct that black moon Lilith. It's not a very nice thing to do. I mean, to say the least, it's not a very nice thing to do. And it's still pushing him forward. Mars, when we talk about squares, like often, right, that opposition, that push and pull, that can be negative, like it's a negative association. But what it actually does lots of times is it pushes us places. Our squares make us go places, they push us. And so right now, Mars is doing some really interesting things. He's also, yeah, he's in a grand cross also today. There's a bunch of stuff with Mars. I have my eye really on him because I think he is the decider of many things, including stuff with the election. But he's pushing against these two, right? He is at the top of this little triangle between the north and the south node. And so while he is bringing up old stuff, another assassination attempt, something hard on Trump, he's also pushing him forward to keep going. So that's kind of what I was looking at. What do you see, Allie?
Oh, I love it. That's really what I was looking at, was that Mars square to the nodes, and I was like, oh man, some martial action forcing him along on his destiny. And this Pluto Uranus trine, we have not seen the end of this yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been reading a book. One of my big preoccupations lately, Lila knows this, but nobody else knows this really, has been the idea of fate. which
Mhm.
I really don't like. I prefer to really believe that like everything is agency. And I think that it can be very helpful to approach your life from a space of taking responsibility for how your life shows up for you. But how much does fate actually play into things? Like, how much is there already a calendar that is set and you really can't mess with it? You know, no matter what you choose, it's still going to show up that way. So I'm reading a book about this right now, and she says, in her opinion, astrologically speaking, the planets of fate are Pluto and Uranus and Neptune, and those are the big players in fate. Those
Mhm.
three, and look at that actually, now that I'm bouncing between them, we have this little triangle here at the end of this grand kite. All of this, the big players in fate pointing directly at his sun. Oh my gosh. And this is also, I mean, like, this is a snapshot of that moment for him, but this grand kite is kind of, it's active for everybody on the whole world right now as well. Like, we are all players in a very fateful game right now where there are big forces beyond our control aligning in certain ways that are going to trigger people to take different actions depending on what's going on in our own natal charts, depending on the choices that we've made. Like, here's the real deal: not all of us are power players, you know?
Mhm.
But Donald Trump is a power player, you know? And like,
Mhm.
Putin is a power player, and
Mhm.
Kamala Harris is a power player. Like, Joe Schmo down the street, how this big alignment is going to show up for him and his fate is going to be really different from how it's going to play out in the hands of the human beings that actually click the buttons that change the world, you know?
Mhm.
So, this is I'm going to pull up America's natal chart right now. Let's pull up a second. Let's do this. Um, so I've been looking at all these charts all the day. Actually, this is a notable thing. Ah,
Yeah.
switch it
Yeah.
around. This is Donald Trump's birth chart on the inside, and you can see that his north node was exact Jupiter at that moment. Like,
Yeah.
talk about lucky. The
Lucky.
lucky
Lucky.
guy. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, the luck was aligned for him.
So lucky.
Which is crazy. Neptune in that moment, or no, this is his natal Neptune, was right next to the transiting midheaven and south node.
Mhm.
Very, very interesting. But this is not what I wanted to look at. I wanted to look at America's birthday. And this is something that I had talked about in the context of the eclipse.
Mhm.
Did it wrong. Come here. This is the wrong one. Okay. The second assassination attempt, this, do you see that this Jupiter and
Mhm.
Mars and Jupiter and Mars,
Yep.
this super like mutual reception action where
Yes.
they are all aligned, um, lining right up for this expansion of conflict energy. Like, that's what that Mars is all
Yeah.
about, is conflict.
Mhm.
And there is some other really interesting stuff going on with Saturn, but I'll come back to that in case you have something you want to share about this chart. This is America's birthday and the second Trump assassination attempt in the context of the nation as a whole.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's so interesting that alignment with Jupiter and Mars, right? Because it is big time conflict, right? And I think this is a microcosm of a lot of, what the nation is going through on a macro scale. We're now building up, but it's also like taking action, and as well as like luck in conflict. Like when you have Jupiter there, like Jupiter is always helping you. Jupiter is your big benefic. He's the most generous planet, the probably the most helpful planet. And so even though he's expanding the conflict, he's also giving bravery and like the ability to, kind of sidestep, right? I also would note that Venus is not too far away from that Jupiter, which is super helpful, I think, and all of the way this played out, because Venus is playing almost this like peacemaker in this conflict and trying to be helpful as Mars is going past, right? And mitigating some of that. I also was thinking about the luck that they had, that they got the license plate of the guy as he drove away. You know, they got the license plate, they can track him down, they figured out who it was pretty quickly, or so we think at this point. So that's kind of what I was looking at on this chart. I thought that was really interesting, and interesting to see the way one person, the way this, well, I guess one person affects a nation, but also just how one day affects the nation, right? So like this is our day right now, and this is how it's affecting America, right? Like in that way. And so we're seeing this alignment, and it's also crazy to see that Pluto alignment just perfectly right there. So we're in for some big transformation for sure. Pluto on Pluto is giant transformation in the US and probably the economy. I mean, anyway, because the second house. So,
Yeah, it's true. I haven't known how much to really take the Pluto thing too seriously because it is like a slow moving planet, but
yes.
here's the deal. It comes back to the Pluto return. So if
Yes.
you're new
Yeah.
around here, we talked about the Pluto return for years, like literal years now, since 2019. I've been talking about it. That in 2021 and 2022, Pluto went back to where it was when America first took its first breath at the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And what that indicates is a 12-year period of big disruptions while America kind of sorts itself out and reconfigures itself, possibly from the base up, which uh, could look a bunch of different ways, and hopefully I don't have to like spell it out for you. This could be really interesting. And we have this window until 2034. We're 2 years into the 12-year window.
Yeah.
And this is our first big presidential election since that happened. And the way that this election plays out is obviously going to impact the entire face of the entire world. So some very, very interesting stuff. Let's go and okay, let's take this back. This is Donald Trump's birth chart.
Mm-hmm.
And let me see, where is all of the Saturn stuff that I had found earlier? Maybe it is in here. Okay,
Where
so
Uranus.
yeah, squaring Uranus. That's exactly it. The second assassination attempt happened while the transiting Neptune was square his native Uranus. Okay, and that really stood out to me. If we look at that, there's his natal Uranus at 17 degrees of Gemini, and here is the transiting Saturn at 15 degrees of Pisces. And this square action, it's been happening for a while and it's going to continue to happen for a while because Uranus is a very slow mover. Oh, sorry. His Uranus is set, but Saturn is on a 29-year cycle. So
Mm-hmm.
this is not one like the moon where like 2 days later it's in a whole different place. Saturn's been hanging out in Pisces for a while. It's going to stay in Pisces for another little while, and it's going to be aspecting his Uranus for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
But Saturn, let's talk about Uranus first. Like Lila had just said, where Uranus is in your chart, like that's where things are just gonna happen to you. They're gonna happen for you. They're gonna force you to look within and get authentic about yourself and how you're showing up for the world. And of course, Donald Trump's natal chart, he has this next to his sun and the North Node in the
Mm-hmm.
10th house of the public eye, where everybody gets to see all the stuff that happens to him.
Yep.
Um, but Uranus is traditionally associated with things like earthquakes, natural disasters, um, surprise, horrible things that might take a person out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then on the other hand, we have Saturn, which is the law of the harvest. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. And when Saturn is making an aspect with Uranus, especially a transiting Saturn making an aspect with a native Uranus, what we might see is how are people wanting to um like distribute retribution for their perceived like whatever they've received from the native, so like
Yeah.
if they are like crazy about that person, how are other people going to be showing that person that harvest and like showing their thanks? If they feel deeply wronged, how are they going to be showing like, hey, you hurt my feelings real bad? And we're seeing it now twice in just a few weeks. People are feeling this transit, and the people that um really resonate with Donald Trump and feel gratitude towards him are showing that in one way, and the people that deeply hate him and resent him are showing that in another way. But he is definitely reaping the consequences of being a very polarizing figure.
Hmm. I would also say, right, that Gemini placement is so important because what is Gemini, right? It's the two faces. It's the two sides of everything, right? Some people think he's an absolute hero. Some people think he's the devil as we know it. And I feel like that is who he is in the public eye, right? He is two faces. He is totally, totally different, right? And to so many people, and that's where there's such a clash. And so, that's why Uranus is bringing this out. And I would say from Pisces, right, which is, if we're going to be more honest about this, Pisces can be the place of delusion, right? It is a sign of delusion, and people are, have their own delusions about him, positive and negative. And, those delusions are playing out and being amplified by his two faces. They're very polarized, and so what do you get? You get this big bang, when those two things hit each other. And it's being amplified by Jupiter, which is 3 degrees away, but I could see it's still in that window, you know? And and of course, because Jupiter is transiting his north node and his sun, he is going to be so visible right now. He is so, so, so visible. So everything that happens to him, we're going to be hearing about, of course, because it's an election, but also there will be more and more events we will see. And we can see this echoed in his zodiacal releasing, which we'll talk about in a minute, but that he's going to be out there for sure.
One thing I do think is interesting, I don't know how much your feeds have been impacted by this event, but mine barely were at all.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
even on Twitter, I was not seeing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I really had to search for it. Like somebody on
Mm-hmm.
Facebook, fortunately, was like, oh my gosh, check out what happened. And they like
Mm-hmm.
pointed below. So I clicked on the link and it took me to the place. And you can't speak openly about what is happening here, which is another piece of the puzzle. But really fast, okay, that's what we just talked about. And what was the other thing that, okay, he has the transiting Neptune is trine his personal Saturn. And I believe that is when you have a transiting Neptune making an aspect like that with your natal Saturn, a lot of times it leads to physical body like injuries or something. Like I just discovered that I had stuff happening that triggered the exact moment that I went to the hospital with pneumonia last year. Like
Mm-hmm.
things are lined up for him to be experiencing physical things, like whether it is a pneumonia situation or somebody trying to get him in a different way. The stars are aligning for these kinds of challenges right now. Um, which is really interesting. Okay, Lila, do you want to share your screen of Zodiacal releasings?
Yes.
I have
More
to
than
go in like
happy.
10 minutes, but we're gonna squeeze every last drop of the time that we have.
Yes. Let's see if it
Yes.
will let me pull this up. What? Share? I just want to. Host has disabled.
Oh no, not
I know.
again. Let's see, let's see.
Uh,
Advanced. Can you ask me if I can allow it?
I'm not sure. I was gonna say with that, I do think that Neptune does turn mental things into physical stuff when it transits,
Oh yeah.
right? It does turn mental things, and so there's a lot of stuff coming into reality. Um, it doesn't let me ask you. I don't know if it has advanced. That's
What?
okay. You could pull it up, or I can just tell you what I found without
Oh my
showing
gosh.
it.
You can tell us what you found without showing it. That's fine. We'll see if we can figure it out as we go. But
Mhm.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so they're in zodiacal releasing. For those who don't know, zodiacal releasing shows us the most important parts of your life. When is the most important times for you? When are going to be the busiest? Now, not all of those times called peak periods, the peak periods in your life, not all of them are positive. Sometimes they are impacted negatively. And we can look at this based on your career and your life's trajectory, but we can also look at this based on your health, or what Ali was talking about earlier, the law of fortune, which is like your fate. It's your fate. What happens and what are you fated to become? What's fated to happen to you? And Trump has been lucky twice, and he's had some benefics really helping him out multiple times, and some trines. But someone like Princess Diana, when we look at her zodiacal releasing, we see, she had a malefic crossing during this peak period, and that's when she died, right when she was assassinated. So for Trump, though, what's kind of being activated for him right now is he just went into a peak period, but it's his most difficult peak period. Because it's guarded by Mars, which is one of the malefics, and it's particularly his malefic because he's a day chart. So when people are born during the daytime, when the sun is out, Mars is more difficult on them, and when the when you're born at night, then usually Saturn's a little tougher on you. So he just entered this Leo period this month, and so this month is kind of a tough time, but for his health. And specifically, I'm looking at his health chart, his lot of fortune. He just entered into that, and this specific day on both his career um and his health are showing this more negative impact, this more difficult impact, but that this is incredibly important. Busy, people are seeing it, it's visible. So that's most of what I wanted to say about that without showing everyone the chart.
Wow. So I just pulled up his birth chart again. And so he's in this Leo peak period right now. Is that
Mm-hmm.
accurate? How long
Mm-hmm.
is this?
Let me look at his peak. So this Leo peak period, it's only a level 4 one, so it's just these next 4 days are the difficult ones. So he actually entered into that peak period like right before the shot was
Oh my
fired.
gosh, like moments. That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
So, and interestingly, so it's this Leo peak period with Mars in there and
Mm-hmm.
Pluto in there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of brings me back to this other thing that I was thinking about. Let's switcheroo. And okay, this is okay, the second Trump assassination attempt. Okay, no, dang it, I've gotten myself all mixed up. Let's see. There was a really interesting chart that I had when I had all three out, and now I cannot remember which set of charts that it was. This here on the outside is the first assassination attempt. And I had
Right.
pulled this up because I wanted to see if there was anything that was like obviously lining up here.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I have so many of these things out here, it's like hard to tell exactly. Dang it, I should have written it down. Um, there were some interesting alignments with Venus, and that is all that I remember, but now I can't figure it out. Um,
Well, I guess they're not really sextile to each other. I was gonna say they're sextile to each other, but they're not in two of these. But this is the gunshots at the rally. What happened is the mid inner ring, and then the natal ring of
swapping
the very
rings.
middle.
Okay,
Swapping rings.
I know. Okay. In one of the charts that I'd read here, I'll X out of that. Um, I'll X out of the madness. Ah. But in one of the charts that I had looked at, what the thing that really stood out to me was how much of what was going on was in the 12th house. And so now I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
where is this? Because the 12th house is considered the house of secret enemies. Okay, here it
Yep.
is. I found it. It's all coming back to me. Let us share the screen. I just had to go through every single one of my recently used charts. This is Donald Trump's solar return. This is
Yes.
his birthday. So when the sun went back to where it was in the sky when he was born, way long ago, when it went back there today, this year on his birthday of June 14th, it was technically June 13th that the sun went exactly to that spot. Look at all of this action in the 12th house of secret enemies. Here we have the sun sandwiched by Mercury and Venus, and Jupiter is in there, and the whole thing is intercepted. And I just thought, oh my gosh, he is going to be super targeted by so many secret enemies. But I think it's really interesting that he's sandwiched by the two benefics. His son
Yes.
is being protected on both sides by Jupiter and then Venus. And also notably, I only know this because anytime anything is at 4 degrees of Gemini for me, my chart goes crazy. Like
Mm-hmm.
I cannot even tell you. It's so long. But this is what's called a critical degree. It's unusually important, and anything at 4 degrees of Gemini is going to have an outsized impact. So this is a very, very interesting solar return to me, because all of this stuff about hidden enemies, here we have Saturn conjunct the midheaven, and making this interesting T square here with his sun and like this whole stellium, and down here the part of fortune. What we're seeing is this year in the public eye, people are going to be really extra polarized. He's really going to see the results of his polarizing behavior in the past, where people are going to love him or hate him. To
Hmm.
me, that's like that Saturn in Pisces plus the sun in Gemini and all of that. But there is this element of good luck that's attached to him. And then over here, of course, we have Pluto in eighth, which just really stood out to me that it's like all alone in the god of death in the house of death.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and making this interesting trine both to Uranus and to Jupiter.
Hmm.
Could it be that he gets hit over and over again with what look like unlucky events, but he himself is lucky through them because they're an opportunity to shed additional truth on the authenticity of some kind of situation at hand?
Yeah. I can definitely see that. I'm very also very interested on how that's playing with Black Moon Lilith down at the bottom, which Black Moon Lilith sometimes function as like it's time to take your medicine, in many ways, right? Not always the viewed as
Mhm.
the kindest character, right? But somehow lucky, somehow, in a transformational way, right? There are these bad things happening, but Jupiter's kind of mitigating everything. So and I think this comes out as like everything bad that happens to him, like the last assassination attempt, only puts him farther ahead. And that's kind of what it looks like. Bad things happen, but they only push him farther ahead. And we'll see. And they may be medicine for him, right? Like he seems to at least has claimed to have some changes of heart of things after the first assassination attempt, and also he's been aligning himself with people like RFK Jr., who is such a big player and having to do with literally taking your medicine and like cleaning up the earth and doing all these things, and that pushing him and helping him in a very lucky way. So I think that's interesting as well.
Yeah, that is true. Okay, I technically should have left 5 minutes ago, but it's okay. We're gonna keep talking for 2 minutes and kind of sum up on our total thoughts about this situation. Um, I mean, to me, I'm looking at the stars are aligning, not just for these two attempts. I personally will be shocked if we don't see at least one or two or
Yep.
four more between now and election day.
Mm-hmm.
However, he does seem to have a lot of like the lucky stuff, like the lucky stars are aligning. I mean, geez, it just looks like the stars are aligning for a lot of people to be getting very upset about him and taking serious violent action, but that he is also experiencing this kind of incredible, I don't know, call it divine protection or just call it like random protection from the universe, like, but there is something operating here that does appear to be operating.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say we kind of talked about this last time we talked about his Zodiacal releasing. I don't remember if I told you on the air or off the air, but we had talked about, he's going to have another assassination attempt for sure. Looking at he's going into these hard placements where he gets visibility. They're very busy. He's still in this big build period, but he has a lot of culmination coming up. His life is culminating in many, many, many ways. So we have not seen the end of it, and we will see how it ends up affecting America in these huge ways and affecting the Pluto return as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it was off the air that we were talking about how he has some really interesting culminating type energies showing up the week after the election. Is
Yep,
that right? Like
that's
November like
correct.
12th through the 19th.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so that is a week that we're keeping our eyes on
Hmm.
because I think it would be a very interesting, I mean, obviously life altering for everybody kind of situation if he were to make it to election day and then have something else happen the week after.
Yep.
I mean, we'll keep an eye on it. Okay, I really have to pick my kids up from
Yes.
school. Okay, love you guys. Okay, thanks for hanging out. Bye.
Bye.